What happens when one of Hollywood's most soft-spoken legends finally reaches his breaking point and decides he won't let anyone, not even Whoopi Goldberg, talk down to him on live television? Before we dive in, make sure you hit subscribe to Talk Flair, drop a like, and comment below to keep these explosive celebrity moments coming your way, because today's story is one nobody saw coming. It was supposed to be one of the most relaxed episodes of The View that week, a casual sit-down about an upcoming film, sprinkled with a few lighthearted questions, maybe a joke or two at the actor's expense. Nothing unusual, nothing intense, but something felt different from the moment Keanu Reeves walked onto that stage. The studio lights hit his face, revealing the quiet tension in his eyes, a kind of heaviness that didn't belong to the man fans knew as humble, grounded, and unfailingly kind. The audience erupted with cheers, some even rising to their feet. Keanu flashed a warm, grateful smile, bowing slightly as if to absorb the energy without letting himself be consumed by it. He took his seat at the table. The hosts exchanged quick glances, some welcoming, others calculating, as if deciding how far they could push today's conversation. Whoopi Goldberg leaned forward first, elbows resting on the desk, her expression sharp, curious. "Keanu, welcome back," she said. "It's been a long time." He nodded politely. "It's good to be here. Thank you for having me." But even in that simple exchange, there was an undercurrent, like two steady currents moving toward a future collision. Sunny Hostin jumped in next, her tone bright. "Your fans are calling your new role your most emotional performance yet. I mean, they're saying this might be one of the greatest comebacks of your career." Keanu smiled, a little embarrassed. "I don't know about that," he murmured. "I just try to put my heart into the work." The audience awed at his sincerity. Someone shouted, "We love you, Keanu," prompting a shy wave from him. But Whoopi wasn't smiling. She had a sheet of notes in her hands, something she almost never used in these interviews, and she flipped it over with a quiet but pointed slap against the table. "That's nice and all," she said, interrupting the gentle moment. "But let's talk about something else. Keanu, lately there's been chatter that you've become too sensitive about certain questions, that you're easily offended. Is that true?" The air dropped 10 degrees. Keanu blinked, confused. "I'm not sure what you mean." Whoopi shrugged, raising her eyebrows. "Well, you've walked out of interviews before. You've told reporters certain topics are off limits. And let's be honest, Hollywood isn't exactly used to the silent mystic warrior routine you've been doing. Don't you think you're taking yourself a little too seriously?" The audience let out a collective gasp, soft, disbelieving, unsure if they heard correctly. Keanu's posture shifted just slightly. That calm, peaceful energy he carried began tightening around the edges, like a drawstring being pulled in. But he didn't lash out. He didn't interrupt. He simply stared at her for a moment, the way someone examines a puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit the picture. "I'm taking myself too seriously?" he repeated gently, almost as if he hoped she'd retract the comment. Whoopi gave a small shrug, casual but sharp. "I mean, come on, Keanu. You're an actor. People are going to ask questions. Tough ones. If you can't handle a little heat." "I never said I couldn't handle heat," he cut in softly. The studio fell dead silent. His voice wasn't raised. It wasn't sharp, but it carried something stronger than anger, something solid, something immovable. "I've always respected interviews," he continued quietly. "I've always tried to answer honestly and respectfully. But I also believe respect goes both ways." That shift, that sudden firmness, ran through the audience like a vibration. People straightened in their seats. Some whispered. Some froze. Something was about to happen. Something they weren't used to seeing from Keanu Reeves. Whoopi leaned back slightly, surprised by the unexpected pushback. Her eyebrows lowered, her voice tightening. "So what are you saying? Are you implying that we're being disrespectful?" Keanu didn't flinch. "I'm saying that questions built on assumptions, especially negative ones, don't create a conversation. They create conflict." A murmur rippled through the crowd, soft but growing. One woman near the front clasped her hands, whispering, "Oh my God, he's actually calling her out." Whoopi crossed her arms. "Keanu, this show is about honesty. We ask real questions. If that makes you uncomfortable." "It doesn't make me uncomfortable," he said, still calm, still composed. "But I won't be disrespected." You could hear the oxygen leave the room. Even Joy Behar, who usually jumped in during tense moments, stayed silent. Sunny's mouth parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but she knew better. Whatever was unfolding wasn't done yet. Keanu continued, his voice low, steady, almost haunting in its quiet intensity. I've spent years trying to stay grounded. I've been through loss, hardship, loneliness. I've seen pain in ways I don't talk about publicly. So when someone tries to reduce me to a punchline, a stereotype, I have to speak up. The audience applauded, not wildly, but with a slow building force, as if afraid that clapping too loud might shatter the moment. Whoopi glanced at the crowd, annoyed by the shift in energy. Hold on, she said, gesturing for quiet. Nobody's making you a punchline. I'm just asking questions people want answers to. But those questions, Keanu replied, should be rooted in truth. In fairness. Not in rumor. His eyes locked onto hers. Not angry, not aggressive, but deeply tired of something invisible, something old. Something he'd probably endured for far too long. And for the first time all episode, Whoopi had no immediate comeback. The camera zoomed slowly toward Keanu's face, the tension in his jaw, the quiet fire behind his eyes. He wasn't here to fight, but he also wasn't here to be stepped on. The audience leaned forward. Someone muttered, "He's done being polite." Whoopi inhaled slowly, as if deciding whether to escalate or retreat. But before she could speak, the producer's voice buzzed in the host's earpieces. Go to break. Go to break. Now. But the cameras kept rolling for a few seconds more, capturing one final shot. Keanu staring straight ahead, unwavering, silent, and more powerful in that silence than any outburst could ever be. The moment the red on air light dimmed and the commercial break theme music faded into the background, the studio transformed. What had been a charged but controlled on-camera atmosphere shifted into a tense backstage pressure chamber. Producers hurried across the floor with whispered commands, adjusting equipment, signaling crew members, and exchanging nervous glances. The hosts straightened their papers and sipped water, pretending to reset, but the weight of what had just happened hung over the table like a storm cloud. Keanu remained seated, hands folded in his lap, breathing slowly as if grounding himself. His calm presence was unsettling in the best and worst ways. It was the calm before an uncertain storm, a quiet force that neither the hosts nor the producers knew how to navigate. Whoopi Goldberg lifted her cup to her lips, but her hands trembled slightly, just enough to reveal that the exchange had rattled her. She shot Keanu a glance, not quite hostile, but undeniably wary. He caught the look but didn't respond. His eyes stayed forward, unfocused, lost somewhere deep inside a thought he refused to share. So are we addressing this after the break? Joy muttered under her breath, leaning closer to Whoopi. Whoopi exhaled sharply. We can't ignore it, she whispered back. He practically accused me of attacking him. Sunny Hostin leaned in too. Maybe we should ease up, she suggested softly. The audience is clearly on his side. Which is exactly the problem, Whoopi snapped in a tight whisper. One wrong move and suddenly we're the villains. Keanu heard every word. He didn't turn toward them, but the faint tightening of his jaw made it clear he wasn't tuning it out either. A stage manager approached. 30 seconds, she called out, her voice pitched a little too high, betraying the tension. We're back in 30. The hosts straightened, forced smiles settling onto their faces like freshly painted masks. Keanu inhaled quietly, lifting his chin just a fraction. He wasn't preparing for a fight. He was preparing for honesty, the sort that shakes a room. The red light blinked back on. The theme music faded. The cameras zoomed in, and the atmosphere returned to that electrifying stillness, a moment suspended between calm and chaos. Joy Behar, always the one to diffuse with humor, attempted a soft landing. Well, she said, smiling awkwardly, that was a lively start to the morning. A ripple of laughter emerged from the studio audience. Not strong, but polite, cautious, like people testing the temperature of the water before diving back in. Keanu offered a courteous smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Sunny turned toward him. Keanu, she said gently, before the break, things got a little heated. And I think viewers might appreciate if we continue the conversation with clarity. Whoopi's eyes narrowed just slightly. She sensed Sunny was taking control, redirecting the situation. Keanu nodded. Clarity is good. The camera zoomed closer on his face, the audience leaning in. Sunny continued. You mentioned respect. And I think that's an important point. Sometimes conversations can feel harsh, even if that's not the intention. Whoopi's voice cut in with forced composure. And sometimes people can be overly sensitive, especially celebrities who aren't used to. Keanu turned his head slowly toward her, his expression unreadable. The studio froze. The air tightened again. Is that what you think I am? he asked softly. Overly sensitive? His tone wasn't aggressive. It was something far more dangerous, calm, sincere, edged with pain he'd tried to hide. The audience murmured. Whoopi shifted in her seat. I think, she said, choosing each word like stepping on glass, that you're not above being challenged. Keanu nodded slowly. And I've never claimed to be. But there's a difference between being challenged and being provoked. Whoopi leaned forward, defensive now. Keanu, nobody is provoking you. I asked a question. That's what we do here. It's not personal. But it is, Keanu replied quietly. Because those questions come from somewhere. They come from assumptions about who someone is, how they think, how they behave. And those assumptions are very personal. The audience let out a wave of soft applause. Whoopi's lips pressed together into a thin line. She glanced toward the producers, a silent plea for backup, but they didn't intervene. Keanu continued, each word deliberate. I'm not here to create a scene. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to talk about my work, my experiences, my journey, the same as anyone else who sits at this table. His voice softened even more, which somehow made the moment heavier. But dignity matters. And when someone starts a conversation with labels, with rumors, he paused, swallowing. It becomes impossible to speak from the heart. The audience erupted again, louder this time. Keanu didn't bask in it. He didn't smirk. He didn't even look relieved. He simply sat with it, as if accepting the support, but refusing to wield it. Whoopi inhaled sharply, shoulders stiffening. She wasn't used to being held accountable on her own turf. Okay, she said, waving a hand. Fine. Let's put all that aside and start fresh. Keanu hesitated for a moment. Then he nodded. I'd appreciate that. But the moment the tension seemed to ease, Whoopi struck again. Not out of malice, perhaps, but out of a kind of stubbornness she couldn't turn off. So, she said, tilting her head, in this new movie you're doing, you play a character dealing with grief. Is that why you've been so touchy in interviews lately? Because you're too close to the material? The audience gasped. Joy winced. Sonny's eyes widened. Even the crew members behind the cameras exchanged stunned looks. Keanu's lips parted slightly, not in anger, but in a quiet, wounded disbelief. He blinked once, twice, his breath catching in a way that only the closest cameras noticed. But then, slowly, deliberately, he sat up straighter in his chair. No, he said softly. But the softness had changed. It wasn't gentle anymore. It was firm, grounded, like steel wrapped in velvet. His eyes locked onto Whoopi's, and the entire world seemed to momentarily pause. No, he repeated. I'm not touchy. I'm human. A stillness fell over the room, so thick it felt physical. And I've carried grief long before this movie, he said, voice trembling just enough to reveal the truth behind it. But that doesn't give anyone the right to weaponize it. A woman in the audience covered her mouth. A man whispered, Oh my God. Keanu continued, his voice gaining strength, though still quiet. You don't get to decide how much pain a person should hide just to make an interview more comfortable. Not mine. Not anyone's. Whoopi stared at him, stunned into silence, the rare kind that comes not from fear, but from being confronted with a truth spoken so plainly that there is nothing left to argue. The audience burst into applause, this time uncontrollable, emotional, overwhelming. Keanu didn't turn toward them. He didn't soak in the praise. His eyes stayed locked forward, focused, grounded. Something inside him had shifted. He wasn't just defending himself anymore. He was drawing a line. And Whoopi Goldberg had stepped right over it. The segment timer blinked red again. The host's earpieces buzzed frantically. Wrap it. Cut to break. Cut to break now. But just before the cameras faded out, they captured one last haunting image. Keanu Reeves, eyes steady, heart exposed, no longer the quiet guest on the show, but a man who finally decided he wouldn't be disrespected. When the cameras cut for the second time, the applause didn't fade immediately. It lingered, echoing, vibrating through the studio like a low, rolling wave of disbelief. Even the audience didn't seem sure whether they should quiet down or stand up and cheer harder. The producers scrambled again, their voices sharp in the host's earpieces. Control the room. Reset. Reset now. We cannot have another explosive segment. Do you hear me? But it was too late. Something irreversible had already ignited. Keanu Reeves sat at the center of the table, a calm but undeniable force. There was no anger in his eyes, just a depth, a resolve, like someone who had finally opened a door he'd kept locked for years. Whoopi Goldberg pushed her chair back slightly, tugging at the collar of her jacket as if she needed more air. Her expression was a storm of emotions: irritation, confusion, disbelief, maybe even embarrassment. Not because Keanu had embarrassed her, but because she had underestimated him. Joy Behar, clearly rattled, leaned forward. "Whoopi," she whispered quickly. "Maybe don't go at him again." "I wasn't going at him," Whoopi hissed, though her voice quivered with the strain of defending herself. "I asked a question." "Well," Joy muttered, "it didn't feel like just a question." Sunny Hostin rubbed her forehead. She looked at Keanu with empathy, genuine, quiet, respectful. "We might need to shift the tone," she said softly. "He's opening up. We should meet him halfway." Whoopi didn't respond. She just stared at the table, fingers drumming in a restless rhythm. The stage manager stepped forward again. "Back in 15 seconds, she called out, her voice both firm and shaky. Keanu exhaled slowly, eyes drifting to the studio audience, many of whom wore expressions of concern, admiration, and something else, protection perhaps. They didn't just like him. They felt for him. 10 seconds. Sunny glanced at him. "Do you want to continue?" she asked quietly, sincerity pouring from her voice. Keanu nodded once. "Yes." 5 seconds. Whoopi lifted her chin, bracing herself. 3, 2, 1. The red light came back on. The audience hushed, and the tension coiled around every corner of the room. Whoopi forced a smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome back," she said. "We're continuing our conversation with Keanu Reeves, and, well, things have gotten pretty real today." Keanu didn't shift, didn't shrink, didn't look away. Sunny stepped in quickly. "Keanu, before the break, you spoke about grief, respect, and the challenges of being vulnerable in interviews. And I think it resonated with a lot of people. Would you be open to sharing what brought you to that place?" Keanu inhaled deeply, and for the first time, the audience saw the weight behind his stillness. Not sadness, but something more profound. Experience. History. Humanity. He nodded. "It's not a secret," he began softly, "that I've lost people I loved. That I've gone through things I don't always talk about publicly, because some pain is sacred. It doesn't need to be turned into headlines." A silence spread through the audience, deep, reverent. "But," he continued, "grief teaches you things. It teaches you how fragile people are, how the smallest words can cut deeper than we realize. That's why I try to live with kindness. Why I try to be patient. Why I try to listen." His voice trembled, barely, but enough for the cameras to catch it. "But kindness," he added, "shouldn't be mistaken for weakness." The audience erupted in applause, fierce, emotional, loud. Keanu didn't smile. He let the applause wash over him like a tide, but he stayed centered, composed. Whoopi finally spoke. "So you're saying I was being unkind?" "No," Keanu said gently. "I'm saying the assumptions behind your questions were." Whoopi blinked, stunned, offended, but also confronted in a way that forced her to reflect, whether she wanted to or not. Joy stepped in to lighten the mood. "Keanu, listen. You're clearly someone who chooses your words very carefully. And that's a good thing. But Whoopi asks tough questions. That's her style. That's what she does." Keanu nodded slowly. "And I respect that. Truly. But I also hope that tough questions can still be built on fairness. Not on speculation." The audience clapped again. Not dramatically this time, but in agreement, as if he had verbalized something many had felt about interviews for years. Whoopi shifted, looking down for a moment before lifting her gaze. "Okay," she said. "Fair enough." It was the closest she could come to conceding without losing control of the space. But Keanu wasn't finished. "I'm not here to blame anyone," he said quietly. "I'm here to ask for something simple, humanity. Even in tough conversations. Even when the cameras are rolling." Sunny pressed a hand to her chest, visibly moved. "I think you've just reminded a lot of people, including us, why conversations like this matter." Keanu bowed his head slightly in gratitude. But then Whoopi leaned in again, not aggressively this time, but with an edge of frustration she could no longer hide. "Keanu, can I ask you something real?" He nodded cautiously. "What do you want people to take away from this? From you pushing back like this?" Keanu met her eyes. And then he spoke with a truth that felt like it cracked the lights above. "That I'm not here to be a symbol of silence," he said softly. "I've been quiet a long time. I've let people say what they want, twist things, assume things, because I thought staying silent was the peaceful choice." The audience hung on every word. But silence can look like permission. A collective gasp rolled through the crowd. "And I don't want to give permission anymore," he said. "Not for disrespect. Not for assumptions. Not for narratives that don't reflect reality. Not for anyone, not reporters, not strangers online, not even people sitting across from me on TV. Whoopi's mouth parted slightly. Joy's eyes widened. Sunny looked stunned. Keanu continued, his voice calm, steady, but filled with power. I'm not angry. I'm not lashing out. I'm just choosing to speak. To stand up. Because I won't be disrespected. Not quietly, not politely, not anymore. The audience exploded, standing, cheering, clapping, some even wiping tears from their eyes. It wasn't applause for drama. It was applause for truth, for courage, for watching a man reclaim his voice in real time. Keanu didn't stand. He didn't bow. He didn't break eye contact with Whoopi, who sat frozen, not humiliated, but undeniably shaken. The cameras pushed in closer. Keanu's voice dropped to a whisper, almost too soft for the microphones. I think everyone deserves that. A chance to say, enough. The applause grew louder, rising like a wave that filled every corner of the studio. Whoopi swallowed hard. Joy covered her mouth. Sunny blinked away emotion. And then, with perfect, almost poetic timing, the producer's voice cracked in their earpieces. Final segment coming up. Prepare to wrap. But nobody, not the hosts, not the crew, not the audience, had any idea how explosive the final moments of this interview would become. When the final segment returned from break, the studio felt different. Heavier, quieter, charged with that eerie hush that comes after something monumental, when everyone senses the next breath might change everything. Joy Behar tried to smile but couldn't quite manage it. Sunny Hostin folded her hands, composed yet visibly emotional. Whoopi Goldberg sat straighter than before, her shoulders tense, her gaze sharp and unreadable. Even the camera operators stood unusually still, as if any sudden movement might break the fragile air around the table. Keanu Reeves waited silently. Not timidly, not cautiously, but with a calm that felt almost regal. He had spoken his truth, and the room had shifted around him. Whoopi cleared her throat first. We've had quite a conversation today, she began, her voice low, tinged with something almost like uncertainty. And since we're wrapping up, I think it's only fair to let you close out with whatever you feel needs to be said. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't an attack either. Keanu nodded thoughtfully. He took a moment, a true, respectful pause, letting the weight settle before he spoke. Thank you, he said quietly. And what I want to say isn't complicated. The audience leaned forward collectively. I came here today because I respect this show, Keanu continued. I respect open conversation. I respect curiosity. But I also respect myself. And that means I can't sit quietly when something crosses a line, even if it's uncomfortable to say so. Whoopi's eyes narrowed slightly, her expression unreadable. But the truth is, Keanu went on, disagreement doesn't have to be disrespect. We don't have to tear each other down to ask honest questions. His gaze drifted between each host with gentle gravity. We can disagree with dignity. We can challenge with compassion. Sunny nodded, visibly moved. Joy exhaled softly, tension easing from her shoulders. But Whoopi wasn't done. So let me ask you something else, she said suddenly, voice sharp but controlled. If you say you want honest conversation, why get so defensive when someone pushes back? Isn't that part of the deal? A few audience members gasped. Not this again. Joy shot her a look. Sunny's eyes widened. Even the crew stiffened. Keanu didn't flinch. Instead, he turned fully toward Whoopi, his chair angled so squarely that the cameras instinctively zoomed in. I wasn't being defensive, he said. I was being clear. There's a difference. Is there? Whoopi challenged. Yes, Keanu answered immediately, his voice low but firm. Defensiveness is fear. Clarity is truth. The audience murmured in agreement. But Keanu wasn't finished. Slowly, he leaned forward, just enough to close the emotional distance between them. And my truth is simple. I won't be disrespected. Not on this show. Not anywhere. The studio fell dead silent. Even Whoopi froze. Not because I think I'm special, Keanu added, but because no one should be expected to swallow disrespect just to seem polite. A wave of applause erupted from the audience, fierce, passionate, uncontrollable. Keanu continued over the noise, his voice steady, almost reverent. I believe in kindness. I believe in patience. But I also believe in boundaries. And today, I needed to draw mine. Joy placed a hand over her heart, visibly moved. Sunny nodded with deep respect. Whoopi stared at him, quiet, not defeated, not angry, but absorbing something she hadn't expected to hear from him. The applause grew louder, echoing through the studio. Keanu finally turned toward the audience, his voice softening to something heartfelt, almost tender. "I hope," he said, "that anyone watching who feels unheard or dismissed or talked over remembers that their voice matters. Even if it shakes, even if someone else tries to talk louder." The audience stood, not gradually, but all at once, rising to their feet like a wave breaking in real time. Keanu didn't bask in it. He didn't smile, didn't beam, didn't revel. He simply bowed his head for a moment, humbled. Whoopi looked around, startled by the standing ovation. For the first time, the power dynamic had shifted, not forcibly, but naturally, undeniably, because truth carried its own gravity. The producer's voice crackled into the host's earpieces. "End the show. End it now." Sunny leaned toward the camera, her voice warm but trembling with the intensity of the moment. "Keanu, thank you. For your honesty, for your strength, and for reminding us all what real conversation looks like." Joy chimed in, smiling genuinely now. "And for giving us a moment we're not going to forget anytime soon." Whoopi hesitated. Then carefully she spoke. "Well, Keanu," she said, voice low but steady, "you certainly made your point today." Keanu met her eyes. "I didn't come to make a point," he replied softly. "I came to be myself." Another wave of applause. The theme music swelled in the background, but it couldn't overpower the energy of the room, the tension, the emotion, the awe. Cameras zoomed out. Lights dimmed just slightly. And then finally, the red on-air light went dark. The instant it did, producers surged forward, hosts stood, audience members leaned over the railing shouting praise and admiration. Joy hugged him. Sunny squeezed his arm. Even crew members approached, shaking his hand, thanking him, telling him he had just made television history. Whoopi stood a few feet away, watching quietly, troubled, yes, but thoughtful in a way that suggested the moment would linger with her long after the cameras stopped rolling. Keanu Reeves, quiet warrior of dignity, simply nodded to each person who approached him. His presence never faltered. He didn't brag. He didn't gloat. He didn't bask in the storm he'd weathered. He just stood grounded, steady, unshakable. A man who had finally allowed the world to see what silence had been hiding all along. As he walked off the stage, the audience chanted his name. Crew members applauded. People wiped tears. A few even recorded him leaving, whispering, "This is going viral. This is huge." And they were right. Within minutes, clips would explode online. Within hours, headlines would dominate the internet. Within days, the confrontation would become one of the most talked about moments in daytime television history. But for Keanu, it wasn't about going viral. It was about reclaiming his voice, reclaiming his dignity, reclaiming himself. And the world had witnessed it live. As he reached the exit doors, a producer rushed after him, breathless. "Keanu, you know this is going to blow up, right?" He paused, gave a faint smile, and said only, "Then let it." He nodded politely, and walked out into the hallway, leaving behind a silence so dense it felt carved into the air. A silence Whoopi Goldberg would remember. A silence the hosts wouldn't forget. A silence the audience would talk about for years. A silence that meant more than all the noise in the world. If you're watching this right now, what do you think? Was Keanu right to stand up the way he did? Did Whoopi push too far? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear your voice. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Talk Flair for more intense, cinematic celebrity showdowns and dramatic storytelling that puts you right in the middle of the moment.